Hi, everybody. Welcome to Brass Check. We're going to have a really interesting conversation tonight. I've been looking forward to this a long time. Our guest is Yaakov Shapiro, Rabbi. And if you want to follow up on our conversation, he's written a fantastic book called The Empty Wagon. And I've read it.
Wow.
And he's also done a lot of interviews. So due to the limitations of time and space, we won't cover everything that I'd like to cover, but you can get deeper into his message through the book or through the interviews or through a combination of both. So I want to start out by saying where we're going to go, and then we're going to get into the detail. And for people that are, want the cliff notes, number one, Zionism is the foundation of Israel, not Judaism. Um, Zionism is not Judaism. Judaism is not Zionism. Um, in fact, Zionism is antithetical to Judaism and is actually bad for Jews. And this is Rabbi Shapiro's position. And I have to say, I've listened to hours of the interviews, and it makes absolutely perfect sense to me. And I wanted to share his viewpoint with you all. My background is I grew up in New York City. My family's from New York City, three generations. If you grow up in New York City, you encounter many Jewish people. It's part of the New York life. And so I personally, my motivation for this conversation is I'm very concerned with Jewish people being tagged for what Zionist people are doing around in Gaza right now, but in general. It makes as much sense as people pretending to be Italians and committing atrocities, and then the Italians have to say, "Hey, well, it's not us. It's these guys that are wearing Italian masks." So I wonder, Rabbi, if I could talk with you first about your background. Your where you live, your community, your how you became a rabbi. These kinds of things I think might be interesting to people to know what your basis is for your viewpoints.
Well, first, thank you for having me. Um, it's a pleasure to be here. I live in New York City. I've lived here pretty much all my life, except for a short stint that I did in New Jersey for a few years. And I'm an Orthodox Jew, and I wanted to be a rabbi because I believe in the Orthodox Jewish religion, and it's a good profession and a good not even so much a profession. It's a good skill to have, and it's a good discipline to master if you're an Orthodox Jew. And I've been an Orthodox Jew all my life, and my position that Zionism is not Judaism is simply because I've studied Judaism all my life. And I've also studied Zionism for probably about 50 years,
Hmm.
all of my adult life and most of my adolescent life. And I got to tell you, people have no idea what Zionism is. The Zionists give such a simplistic definition of Zionism, and they'll change the definition every now and then. They'll say it's the national liberation movement of the Jewish people, but it's not that at all. They'll say it's the belief, the Jewish right to have a homeland, but that's not what it is either. And they'll tell you that it's the Jewish right to independence or self-determination. It's not that either. To begin with, the idea that Zionism is the Jewish people's whatever, that's not true. Um, it's not the Jewish people's anything. From the get-go, Zionism was a split off from Judaism. Zionism, the early Zionists, Theodor Herzl, who died in 1904, and the people around his days, the first Zionist Congress was in the late 1800s, and they were not religious at all. They were not Orthodox Jews. Theodor Herzl didn't even like Judaism much. He didn't like Jews much. He, as you read in my book, Theodor Herzl, he, he, he had anti-Semitic tropes of Jews. He wrote a letter uh, from when he was on vacation, and he said, "Oh, there are so many Jews here with long dripping noses, something like that. Like really a disgusting anti-Semitic guy. He considered himself an exception, a handsome guy. Um, but he 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 really had a inflated sense of self, Theodore Herzl.
And did
But Mhm.
sorry to interrupt, did he come from a Jewish background at least?
He
Or,
came from a Jewish background, but not a religious one. His grandfather, somewhere, everybody's grandfather or great grandfather were religious Jews. Jews before the Enlightenment and the Emancipation, 99% with a few quirky exceptions, but by and large, the Jews were a religious people. That's all they were. They identified as a religion. The problem was that there were Jews after the Enlightenment and the Emancipation where they weren't obligated to stay in ghettos anymore, and they had freedom of religion and also freedom from religion. The problem was that in the late 1800s, 1881, in Russia, there were these pogroms against the Jews, and the pogroms included as their targets assimilated Jews as well. Jews that said we're not really Jews. We're more Russians than Jews. Um, and these enlightened Jews, these assimilated Jews, suffered a crisis of identity. They didn't really want to be Jews. They believed, like Theodore Herzl, that Jews are disgusting and ugly. And they attributed anti-Semitism to the fault of the Jews.
Hmm.
They said, well, if other people would be like that, we'd hate them as well. They had all the anti-Semitic tropes. Jews are dirty, they're disgusting, they're not interested in history. You see, Jews had this lifestyle. Judaism is not just a religion, it's a whole lifestyle. It's a religion that um, governs every facet of our lives. What we eat, sometimes when we eat, there are fast days that we have to have, our the various aspects of our marriage, various aspects of the education of our children. It's a lifestyle, and it's a lifestyle that Judaism believes is a privilege to have. Anybody can partake of it if they want. We take converts. It's not a ethnicity. There are black Jews, white Jews, Yemenite Jews, and German Jews, Arabic Jews, and Russian Jews. They are converts to Judaism. Donald Trump's daughter, Ivanka, converted to Judaism. The Jared Kushner's wife. And I don't think there's any less Jewish person in the world than Donald Trump. And his daughter is a convert to Judaism. King David's great-great-grandmother, Ruth of the Bible, as it says in the book of Ruth, in what the Christians refer to as the Old Testament, she was a Moabite woman that converted to Judaism, and her descendant was King David himself. There's nothing ethnic or genealogical about Judaism. If you're born of a Jewish mother, not of a Jewish father necessarily, but if your mother is Jewish, the religious law is that you are obligated to fulfill 613 commandments, as opposed to the rest of the world that, according to Judaism, is obligated to fulfill the seven Noahide laws, we call them. And if you are obligated to fulfill 613, that makes you a Jew. That's the only definition of Jew. That's all it is.
So
Someone who's obligated.
So it's a very specific, so obedience to God, and God's laid down a set of regulations or ways to regulate your life. And a Jewish person is someone who knows what those are and who follows them.
Well, in order to be precise, a Jewish person is somebody who's obligated to follow them. There are different, Judaism, the religion, metes out obligations, believes that obligations are meted out to people. Not everybody has the same obligations. You can choose to have the 613, and of course, every obligation that you fulfill gets you closer to God.
Mm-hmm.
Every obligation that you violate gets you further away from God. At the end of your life, after a long life, we meet God and we exist in the afterlife forever. And however close to God you got in this world, that's your pleasure and perfection in the next world, because it's only spiritual. And so the more obligations, the more risks, like any job.
Mm-hmm.
The more responsibilities, the greater the risk for failure. And if somebody wants, we don't proselytize, but we absolutely accept converts if they want to convert. But there's certain people who God said, look, I know, I know you, and I want you to be obligated in the 613. I want you to assume the risk. Those people will be born of Jewish mothers. Other people, God says, look, it's your choice. You could do whatever you want.
Mm-hmm.
But the obligation, see, in Christianity, if a person doesn't believe in Christianity, he's by definition not a Christian. Christianity is, the definition of a Christian is somebody that believes in and fulfills Christianity, the religion. In Judaism, the word Jew is somebody who the Torah, that's the Jewish Bible, the Torah obligates to fulfill. It's the obligations that make you a Jew. The covenant with God of the extra commandments. The whole world, again, has 7, and there are 613 for certain people. If you have the 613 responsibilities, then that by definition makes you a Jew. Now, even if you're not religious and you don't believe that, I believe that that person is Jewish because he's obligated.
Okay.
You know, it's like if you're an American citizen and you're bound by American law, right? And you don't believe that there's any government and there's no law. You don't believe any of that. It doesn't matter. You're still bound by it, whether you know it or not. One day you'll find out. And the same thing when we meet God, we'll all find out what this world was about. But those who are obligated to fulfill that massive amount of commandments, the 613, that's what makes somebody Jewish. If you ask a person that doesn't believe in that, what makes him Jewish? So as I've said many times, there is no intellectually consistent, no logical definition of Jew aside from this. If somebody wants to say Jews a race, that doesn't make sense. We have black Jews, white Jews, brown Jews. If somebody wants to say Jews an ethnicity, that also doesn't make sense. We have Ethiopian Jews and German Jews. We have converts. If somebody wants to say Judaism is an ethno-religion, it also doesn't make sense because the ethno part is just not true. There's no ethnicity. And the religion part, if you're going to define a religion by the fulfilling of that religion, like Christianity does, then there are non-religious Jews that are Jews also. And more than that, the idea that if your father is Jewish and your mother is not, you're not Jewish. But if your mother is Jewish and your father is not, you are Jewish. That doesn't follow rules of ethnicity. That doesn't follow rules of race. It doesn't follow rules of DNA. It follows the religious law that says if your mother is obligated to fulfill the 613 commandments, so are you. Interestingly, in Jewish law, paternal lineage determines family and it determines tribe. There were 12 tribes of the Jews in the Bible. And if your mother was from one tribe and your father was from another, the child follows the tribe of the father. Regarding laws of inheritance and family, the father determines the familial affiliation of the child, but only regarding one thing, regarding the obligation to fulfill commandments. According to Judaism, it's maternal lineage that makes the determination. Ipso facto, being Jewish has nothing to do with family. It has nothing to do with lineage. It has nothing to do with tribe. It has nothing to do with ethnicity or DNA. You can convert to Judaism. So that's what being Jewish is. Now, the Zionists, the early Zionists, they stemmed out of these assimilated Jews who had a problem. They didn't want to be Jews. You know, they wanted to be regular Russians, Germans, Frenchmen. But the Russians, it started there, other places as well, didn't let them be Russians. First, the Russians considered the Jews a nationality, kind of like the Estonians. On the Russian identity cards, Christian is a religion, a Muslim is a religion, but Jew is a nationality. Now, the Russians decided that. Obviously, that's the unilateral decision of the Russians. I don't really care what the Russians think I am. They don't dictate my identity to me. especially when their interpretation of my identity makes no logical sense. So these guys went through an identity crisis. There were these lethal pogroms that killed and harmed non-religious Jews as well. And they were like, hey, what's going on with us? We abandoned being Jewish. We're just like these guys that are making the pogroms. Why are they attacking us? And there was this identity crisis, you know. So there are various different answers, various different explanations as to what's going on. And there were all these philosophies that these assimilated Jews came up with. One of them was that the problem is that the Jews are not assimilated enough, meaning they're assimilated into the Russian nation, they're assimilated into the German nation and the French nation, but there is still, for whatever reason, some residual perception that these Jewish people are different.
Mm-hmm.
And what's different about them is that they don't have their own nationality.
Mm.
So what we're going to do in order to stop anti-Semitism is we're going to make the Jews their own nationality. But more, we're going to transform them into a nationality. That was the theory. Other people said communism is the answer, you know, because communism, if you believe in it, means everyone's treated equally, and the Jews will also be treated equally. But very important to note is that Zionism was not designed in order to end anti-Semitism, although they believed it would, as I just explained.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't the motivation behind Zionism. That was a beneficial byproduct that they thought Zionism would bring. The reason they wanted to create Zionism was because, as I mentioned, they believe the Jews are responsible for anti-Semitism, that the Jews are indeed ugly, disgusting, which is why they didn't want to be Jews to begin with. So they said in order to change the Jews on a collective level, thereby changing people's perception of the Jews,
Mm-hmm.
we have to change their mindset, their ideas, their values. We have to change their aspirations. We got to make them normal people. And the way to do it, again, there were different philosophies. Some said make them communists. Others, and that's our topic now, is make them Zionists. Zionism is nationalism. That's all it is.
Mm-hmm.
But whereas nationalism normally, let's say French nationalism or white nationalism, even black nationalism, takes a identifiable group of people and says, okay, we're going to become nationalists now. Let's say the white people should have their own nation, or the French identity is national as opposed to just a kingdom of the French king or something like that. For the Zionists, they had to create an artificial nationality that didn't exist. Nations are united by things like land, language, and culture, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Jews had no common land, language, or culture. The Jews were all over the world. For thousands of years, they didn't have a state. They weren't interested in one. Our religion tells us that our job in this time period is to be all over the world, sanctifying the world. And we have this whole theology, this whole mission. And you know what? If God is all over, it's good enough for him. It's good enough for us. Judaism is a relationship with God. But the Zionists figured, no, we got to change the Jews into a nationality. We need to give them a language. The Jews didn't have any common language. The Eastern European Jews spoke Yiddish, Spanish Jews, which is a dialect of German. The Spanish Jews spoke the dialect of Spanish called Ladino. The Arabic Jews in Syria, Jews in Morocco, they spoke French, they spoke Arabic.
Mm-hmm.
There are Jews that speak Arabic. And there was no common language, and there was no need to have a common language. Hebrew was reserved for prayers or the studies of the Bible and the studies of rabbinic literature, and it wasn't even a speakable language because there are only a few hundred roots to the entire language.
So isn't there, pardon to interrupt, but
Mhm.
a radical difference between scriptural Hebrew and so-called modern Hebrew?
Well, that's what they did. Scriptural Hebrew, rabbinic Hebrew, which throws in a bit of Aramaic into the Hebrew, and uses different figures of speech. It's not really a speakable language. So the Zionists set out to transformed the Jews into a nationality. So they actually sat down, a guy by the name of Eliezer ben Yehuda was the main guy, sat down and said, I'm going to create modern Hebrew. And it's vastly different. They said, we're going to give the Jews a flag. Nationalities have flag. Nations have flags. The Kurds have a flag, even though they don't have a state. And the Jews, the Israeli, what's called today the Israeli flag, existed before Israel did. The Hebrew language, the modern Hebrew language existed before Israel did. They wanted to unify the Jews, and they got very angry. They were violently Zionists, these guys. It wasn't just, okay, please speak Hebrew. We have to offer you, have something here to offer you. No, any Jew that didn't speak Hebrew, that spoke Yiddish, let's say, instead of Hebrew, was considered like a traitor to the people. They had this nationalist, um, uh, tribal attitude that they wanted to instill, and all this language, this culture to create a Jewish culture was a Middle Eastern culture. Some of them, they changed their names from Milikowski to Netanyahu, right?
Right.
There are all sorts of different Jewish cultures. There's the Ashkenazi Jewish culture. There's the Arabic Jewish culture. They eat different foods. And there really is no really Jewish culture. If you go to a Jewish neighborhood, you said you were in New York City, so you go
Yeah.
to a real Orthodox Jewish neighborhood and you look at the restaurants, the foods that you'll find most of there is like pizza and sushi. That's what Jews eat most. Also hamburgers, fast food places.
Well,
They're
I think people, yeah, I think a lot of people when they think of Jewish people think of New York Jewish people, and that is sort of a culture. I mean, you kind of, that is sort of a type of person. But they're ignorant about the fact there are Jews in Morocco, there are Jews in
right.
Turkey,
And when they say New
Iran.
York Jews, they're thinking about like Woody Allen kind of
Right,
Jews. But
right.
that's not religious. Uh, Ashkenazi, Eastern European, those guys came from originally Hungary, Poland, Germany, Russia, places like that. But there are Yemenite Jews, there are Moroccan Jews, there are Spanish Jews, and there are Jews from those places. My family's from Poland, and I'm nothing like those Jews. I don't really like bagels and lox too much. I much prefer sushi.
Okay.
And I don't understand where they got this business of the Jewish sense of humor. Yeah, I don't really get their sense of humor sometimes. But I don't have anything culturally in common with these so-called New York Jews, except that they are obligated to fulfill the 613 commandments.
If their
That's
mother
it.
if their mother was Jewish.
If their mother was Jewish,
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah.
Um, so that's one particular type of in America. So we're used to guys like Seinfeld, Jerry
Right.
Lewis, Barbara Streisand, these type of people
Yeah.
became the representative samples for the Jewish people. But then they're really not. Woody Allen, things like that. But that's one particular group. But that's not representative of the Jewish people. Uh, yes, they created kind of their own subculture, and that's fine. The Orthodox Jews in Williamsburg have a completely different culture, and the Sephardic Jews, the Syrian community in Brooklyn, is a completely different culture. And that we don't have but the Zionists want to know we should have a country, we should have a culture, something called Jewish names, Jewish flag, Jewish national anthem, the Jewish state. They finally got the Jewish state, and the goal was to take the Jews and change their aspirations, change their values. They hated the Jewish values. When I say that they believed that Jews were responsible for anti-Semitism, the disgustingness of Jews manifested in their minds of the fact that the Jews aren't interested in normal things that normal people are interested, meaning, uh, especially back in those days, the Jews never had military heroes.
Mm-hmm.
I know in the Bible there are all sorts of wars, but those wars, the Orthodox Jews, the traditional Jewish interpretation of those wars they're all run by prophets and miraculously, and based on who's more righteous, he wins. Like in the Psalms, which were written by King David, who had an army, and he's the quintessential in the secular Jewish culture. He's the quintessential warrior, right? And the Zionists made him into like some big shot warrior. But you look in the Psalms, and he whenever he speaks about his enemies, the enemies that want to kill him, he says, God, protect me from my enemies. He doesn't talk like a regular king would, like Ragnar Lothbrok. I'm going to take these guys and cut off their heads and put them on a stake. He doesn't speak. Instead, King David says in the Psalms, I'll say it in Hebrew, then translated, Achash shalti meis Hashem oisa avakesh. There's one thing that I ask of God. Now, there's a king with a kingdom. He asks one thing of God. What would you think he would ask? So he asked, Shivti b'veis Hashem kol yimei chayei, to sit in the house of the Lord all my life. Lachsois b'noyim Hashem u'levake b'heicholoi, to bask in the splendor of God, and to visit God's home, meaning to sit in the house of study or the temple. That's what King David wanted. King Solomon, our tradition tells us, God asked him, I give you whatever you want, one wish. And he said, wisdom. Wisdom, that's it. And God said, because you didn't wish for gold, because you didn't wish for the death of your enemies, because you didn't wish for these other things, I'm going to make you the wisest man. And that's Judaism. And they hated this because the Jews, they were very literate. Compulsory education started in Europe, in France in the mid-1800s. But for the Jews, we had it for 2,000 years. Yeshua ben Gamla, the high priest, about 2,000 years ago, made a decree that any town that doesn't have schools for the children has to be dismantled. You cannot have a town without a school. The town is dismantled or ostracized. There's two different versions of the decree. In any case, this was disgusting to them. The Jews were not interested in art. They weren't interested in architecture. They weren't interested in being warriors. They weren't interested in being normal. The reason why we weren't interested, because as I mentioned, being a Jew is a lifestyle, and it's kind of a monastic lifestyle. Ideally, I mean, the Jews asked to be in ghettos about 1,000 years ago in Spain because it's like, you know what it is? Our life over here is like studying for a test. You ever study for a test? So for 2 weeks, let's say you shut your doors, you close your phone. Anybody that calls, say, you know what, call me back after 2 weeks. You're busy. We're busy our whole life. And there's nothing wrong. It's not sinful if somebody wants to, I don't know, follow sports or be an athlete or be an architect or that. But that's not, we're busy. We're busy getting close to God. And, you know, after we're done with the small amount of time we have in this world, then that investment results in perfection forevermore.
So I'm sorry, if we were to compare this, say, to Catholicism, there are a lot of people that maybe go to church once on Christmas Eve. If somebody's getting married, they'll go to the church wedding. But then on the other side, you have true monks. They've separated themselves from the world. They pray all day. They study all day. That's what they want to do. Their orientations towards God, and they're not terribly interested in, you know, being a social media star.
That's right. And the classic Orthodox Jewish lifestyle was to study and pray as much as humanly possible. We have to make a living. We have families. We got things to do. So this is the Orthodox Jews. It's a challenge, but it's something that it's literally our life. Kihem chayenu v'orech yameinu, as it says. This is our life and the length of our days, which is why, by the way, the Haredim in Israel refuse to go to the Israeli army. They want to change this too. They want to change the Jews. We want to study our Torah. We're not interested in your wars or your army. Their army's an indoctrination camp for Zionism. It's not a question of serving your country. It's a different topic, but the Zionists want us to go into their army because their army, like the Cantonist army, is not merely a military. It's an actual indoctrination camp for their Zionist religion, and we're not interested. We just want to be left alone, and that's it. Now, when they looked at these Jews as disgusting, that's crazy. You're not normal. And these were intelligent people, educated people. They said, why don't you Jews be normal? So first, plan A was, we're going to assimilate. But it didn't work because they were still looked at as Jews by the Russians, by the anti-Semites. So plan B was, we got to repair the Jews. We got to fix them. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to give the Jews, we're going to gaslight them we're going to convince them that they're a nationality. We're going to convince them that they always aspired to national self-determination. We never did. We aspired for the end of days, a messianic, spiritual renewal of the world where God is going to rule the world and everybody will be joined together in one religion under God with liberty and justice for all. And the wolf will lay down with the lamb. No, the Zionists said, no, we always looked for national self-determination. Politics, they took the Jewish religion, took its symbols that are dear to us, took the phrases that are dear to us, and they created an educational system, a brainwashing system, a bullying system that tried to gaslight the Jews into believing that they are a nationality and that they want self-determination. And there was this movement called Zionism, and that's what it was. The goal was they figured if the Jews changed their aspirations, they changed their values,
the orientation.
They change their orientation, they're going to change their personalities, and then they'll be normal like the French, the Cossacks, and the Aryans, like the anti-Semites. They'll be just like the anti-Semites, and everything will be okay for them. That's what they figured. And they said at the first Zionist Congress, 1897, that Max Nordau, Herzl's lieutenant, he said, don't think that the reason why we're creating Zionism is because of anti-Semitism. No, even if anti-Semitism would disappear off the face of the earth, we'd still want to be Zionists. The goal of Zionism was to make the Jews normal. They themselves were the anti-Semites. They themselves hated what the Jews were. And they could not escape the perception that the world had that they are associated with people like me, like Yaakov Shapiro. So they wanted the world to know, no, the world is going to know, the Jews are going to know that we're another French people, we're another German nation, we're another Russians, we're the Cossacks, we're the Aryans. We are like everybody else. And it's going to take generations, but it'll happen. I always give the analogy, and I wrote this in my book. Imagine if somebody wanted to convince the Christians that Christianity really isn't a religion. It's a baseball team. And Jesus was really, he wasn't Jesus, he really was the founder of the team, and the Gospels were all stars. And this idea that the Christianity is a religion, that not the rabbis, the priests, the clergymen, they fooled you. They messed it up. They were a little crazy. They years in exile like rattled their minds, and they're wrong. We got to bring back the old Christianity to its former glory. So what I would do is I would create an educational system teaching them about how the Christians were always a baseball team and they always wanted to play in the major leagues, and that was always their dreams and their prayers. And this religion was, well, you could have different opinions, and they have this about Judaism. The religion was a sickness that came in, or the religion was only a portable identity that the Christians had until they were able to become a baseball team, some way to temporarily unite them. That's what they say about the religion of Judaism, some Zionists. Others say it was just a abomination. It was just a disgusting thing. And I would give them bats and balls, and I would make pinstriped uniforms that say Christians across the chest. And I would let them play ball and teach them, now you're the real Christians, and now you're redeeming the persecuted and retrograde generations and generations of Christians that were lost, and now you're the real Christians. And that's what the Zionists did to the Jews. We'll give you a flag, we'll give you a national anthem, we'll give you a language, and now you're a nationality. Then came the Holocaust, which the Zionists exploited and said, look, see, you didn't have an army, you don't want to be military men, you don't want to fight. Look what happens. And the truth of the matter is it's nonsense, because the Germans overran so many countries that had armies that were regular countries. But no, and the Jews were actually part of these other countries. But no, if the Jews would have a state, and if we would have the Jews would have had a state, then they would be able to defend themselves against the Germans. Yeah, tell that to the Russians, okay?
Yeah,
if they would have
the Belgians or the
Belgians, exactly.
Yeah.
But whatever. This is all part of the Zionist mythology, and it came with bullying and character assassination, and sometimes real assassination of people that didn't want this to happen. Exactly 100 years ago, last month, was the anniversary of the assassination of a Jew by the name of Yaakov Dahan, same first name as me, Dahan, a Dutch guy. He lived in what was then the Holy Land. He lived in Palestine. There was no Israel yet. Literally 100 years ago, last month,
Wow.
and the when Zionism wanted to take over the land because the Zionists didn't pop up into existence in 1948. Again, Herzl died in 1904. They were trying to take over. They had paramilitary groups in those days that were fighting to oust the Arabs and to oust the British, who had the mandate after World War One. And um, the Jews, the Orthodox Jewish community there, which were like, by way of analogy, what you call the monks,
Hmm.
all these, they said, we don't want the Zionists here. We'd rather live under the Ottomans or the British or whatever. We don't want anything. And they said, we're speaking in the name of all the Jews. This is what the Jews want. See, that's one of the tricks of the Zionists. We speak in the name of the Jews. Theodor Herzl wrote in his book that he had some legal right. It's not for now. You have to be a retarded a lawyer of old Roman law. He dug up some old Roman law called Negotiorum Gestio, and he said that according to this law, the Zionists have a right to speak in the name of all Jews. It's insane, but whatever. But they did speak in the name of all Jews, and these Jews were saying no. And they sent this guy, Yaakov Dahan, the chief rabbi, Sonnenfeld, his name was, sent this Yaakov Dahan, who was a very famous lawyer, professor, scholar. He was from Holland, and then he moved to Palestine,
Hmm.
to the British to tell them um, the Jews aren't interested in this whole Zionism thing. So one day he was coming out of a prayer quorum. He walked into the street and it was an eerie scene. There was nobody in the street. It was strange. And a guy by the name of Avram Tahomi went over to him and he said, "Excuse me, sir, do you have the time?" He looked at his watch. Tahomi took out a gun and shot him 3 times in the chest, and he died immediately. Tahomi, it was an assassination. They made sure the Haganah, the Israel's paramilitary group, and Ben Tzvi, who was later become big in Israel, they're talking about the president, and these guys made sure the streets would be empty, and it was the first political assassination in that land. They killed the Orthodox Jew Jacob Dahan. They would try to make sure that the Jews, through their education, through um, I have a chapter in my book called "The Bought, the Bullied, and the Brainwashed." Those
Hmm.
are the 3 methods the Zionists used to make sure that the Jews stay in line. And then after the Holocaust, it was like, okay, we need Jews were very traumatized, and we need a land, and we need a country, and we need an army, and we need everything. And that was, it was a very good marketing tool. They exploited the Holocaust for that. As it turns out, it was a big failure because Israel's the most dangerous place on this planet where Jews live. I'm much safer over here than the Jews are over there. And that was before October 7th. The odds of you getting killed because you're a Jew, any place that Jews live, is astronomically higher in Israel than anywhere else. Every year they have this like global peace index, and there's, let's say, a little less than 200 countries in the world.
Hmm.
Israel is always like 180 most peaceful country out of 200. Mexico is more peaceful than Israel. Okay, usually on the index, Mexico is more peaceful than Israel. And that was before October 7th. I mean, I don't know if the latest one came out yet.
Well,
Um,
the brainwashing has been so extreme because there are many American Jews who buy the whole thing. Like they believe Israel is their homeland, it's their safety valve, and I have to laugh.
right.
A guy living on the Upper East Side with, in a $10 million apartment, perfectly safe, believes that Israel is his safety place. And I'm like, what? I mean, that's not even
Even
logical.
even a guy living on the Lower East
Or the lower,
Side,
wherever. Yeah.
a Lower East Side in a $1,000 or a $3,000, $5,000 studio apartment
Yeah.
is still safer than everybody's. It's insane. No, but the question is, well, what are you going to do if there's a Holocaust um, uh, and Donald Trump or Kamala Harris decides to gas all the Jews like Hitler did, and nobody defends the Jews, and all the anti-Semites gang up against the Jews like they did in Germany, and no one's there to defend them. Where are you going to run? Because, of course, in such a case, we'll be able to run somewhere, and we'll be able to escape. And where are you going to go? If not Israel, no one's going to let you in. Only Israel will let you in, right? This is, okay, you know, I always tell them, okay, let me ask you something. Let's say there's not another Holocaust. Let's say there's not. Let's say in 500 years from now, there's not another Holocaust. By the way, you know, the way the Zionists portray the Holocaust, you would think it happens all the time. There was only one time in history where a guy like Hitler said, I'm going all over the world and killing all the Jews.
Mm.
In history, except perhaps in the biblical times, Haman in the book of Esther. And I'm not even sure about it. It's open-ended. If there was a Jew in the North Pole, would Haman have traveled there out of his province from India to Ethiopia to kill that Jew in the North Pole? I don't even know if there was I don't know. But let's assume that besides Haman and Hitler, it doesn't happen. Yes, there are pogroms and stuff like that. I got that. The world is a different place now. And yes, I know the world was a different place when Hitler happened in Germany. This is all true. But let's say that there is not another Holocaust, okay?
Mm-hmm.
How many, so many Jews, 30,000 Jews killed in Israel, wars, terrorism, you know, and there's no end in sight. How many, this insurance policy that they claim Israel is, in case there's a Holocaust, my question is the premium that they pay for this insurance policy, wars, terrorism, deaths of Jews, the increase of anti-Semitism that happens because of Israel all over the world, right? Every time Israel gets into a war, statistics show anti-Semitism rises because the Jews are blamed for Israel. All of this, at what point does the premium for this insurance policy get too high? If 30,000, 60,000, 100,000, God forbid, Jews are killed, 200,000, a million Jews, at what point does this premium get too high? And also, who gets to make that decision?
Mm-hmm.
And the answers that I get is, here comes the brainwashing, because there's so many dimensions to Zionism. Well, no, better, all of us should die, at least we'll go down fighting. So there's no, we're not like the olden time Jew. Don't forget, they wanted to purify the Jews and transform them. So even that you'd rather die on your feet or die as a human than live as a dog. So yes, we'll go down fighting. These guys are prepared to go down fighting. They're trained to go down fighting, and they're prepared always. They're prepared all their life. But Hitler's coming back, and they're going to go down fighting. That's like, I feel bad for them. You know, imagine, look, the black community in America was persecuted. They were dragged here in chains from Africa as slaves. I mean, what could be worse than that? You know, and then there was even after they were freed, there was this down south, the lynchings and the Jim Crow and all of that. Now imagine that, let's say, the black community would, in the same way that these Zionists visit Auschwitz and Masada and places like that to learn about their... Imagine if the black community would say, okay, let's learn about what it is to be black. And they're going to bring them down to the South to sites of lynchings. And they're going to take kids and they're going to put their heads in nooses. And they're going to say, you know what happened over here? And they're going to show them the shoes of black kids that were lynched and killed by mobs. And they're going to say, never again, the white people will never do this to us again. And we have to be prepared in case there's another, I don't know what, it's some...
Racists enslaved.
Another racist, another Ku Klux Klan, and the Ku Klux Klan is coming for you. And yes, we have to be prepared, and the white people will never do this to us again. And we're going to train them in military training. Then teach them stories about heroes, slaves that rebelled. But listen, the Holocaust is very important to learn lessons of the Holocaust. The problem with Holocaust education is the last chapter of all these curricula in the Holocaust studies is Israel. That's the last chapter. There's the Holocaust, and now is the before. That was the before, and now's the after. It's Israel. The problem is the Holocaust studies end with Israel. Okay, and as if it's a binary choice for Jews, either Israel or Auschwitz, and they're actually taught this.
And literally, and when you say taught this, this is literal. That, for instance, 40% of the next generation of my family happens to be Jewish because of my sister-in-law is Jewish, and they went to Hebrew school, and you know, they know they were indoctrinated, and it is in the school that they went to, it was a pretty intense indoctrination with a lot of these concepts that
And I'm telling you, this is the first I'm hearing of your nephew's or niece's school, but I guarantee you, I'll put any money you want, it was a Zionist school.
well, what
They taught about Israel.
what we learned was when Jacob, that's my nephew, when he had his bar
Uh-huh.
mitzvah, the person teaching him and preparing him was straight from Israel, and there was a lot of talk about she's a very intense Israeli. You know what I mean? It wasn't
Uh,
not a
and
devout Jew, an intense Israeli.
right,
You know what
an
I mean?
intense, right. And to them, even now, they call themselves the Jewish state. I got to tell you something about Israel. You hear these talking points from the Zionists about how there's only one Jewish state, but there's 25 or 28, whatever, Muslim states or Arab states, right? So I got to tell you, there's not a single Muslim or Arab state in the world that's an Arab or Muslim state in the sense that Israel claims to be a Jewish one. Israel is different than all other countries in the world. And this is, if you want to know something about Israel, their politics, if you want to understand what's going on over there with Israel, this is the first thing people need to know. In Israel, the census, the way where they have records of their citizens, there are various categories. There's citizenship, nationality, religion are three of the categories.
Hmm.
Now, you would think nationality Israeli, right? For the Israelis. There is no such thing as an Israeli nationality.
No.
Jewish is the nationality. Remember, the whole idea of Zionism was to transform the Jews from a religion into a nationality.
Hmm.
Not only that, but there's no Israeli nationality. There's only a Jewish nationality. There's Israeli citizenship, but Jewish nationality. Okay? Now, and many times Israel got sued by various appellants who said, no, we want an Israeli nationality. I'm not a Jewish national. Israel has its own identity, its own nationality, right? And time after time, the judges said, no, we can't have an Israeli nationality. A cornerstone of Zionism, this is a quote, a cornerstone of Zionism is, and it's really the cornerstone of Zionism, that Jews are a nationality, not just a religion. So, the Greeks had a religion. They had Zeus, right? And the whole pantheon, the Hercules and Mercury. But they're a nationality, primarily, a nationality that has a national religion. Israel looks at the Jews. This is the Zionist invention as a nationality,
Mhm.
not as an Israeli is not a nationality. You could
Wow.
be Arab nationality. You could be Druze. I think there are 130 nationalities. I think Buddhist is also a nationality in Israel. And that's one half of the equation. Second half of the equation is that whereas all other countries are the countries of their citizens, Israel, by the nation state law, it's a basic law, which is stronger than a regular law. It's kind of like a constitutional law, but they don't have a constitution. Israel is the nation state of the Jewish nationality,
Hmm.
not of the Israeli citizens.
Hmm.
America is the country of the American citizens.
Right.
And I'm an American. It's my nation. And my nation state is America. But according to Zionism, because I'm part of this Jewish nation, which doesn't exist, the Zionists invented it. There's a Jewish religion. But Israel, the Zionists invented a Jewish nationality, a Jewish nation. I'm part of it. Israel is my nation state. If you want to know why Netanyahu goes around saying that he represents all the Jews all over the world, or that Jonathan Pollard says American Jews should spy on America for Israel, it's
Hmm.
because according to Zionist ideology, according to Zionist philosophy, according to Zionism,
Hmm.
Israel is the country of the Jews. And as Netanyahu wrote in his book, if somebody says, I'm not against Jews, I'm not against Jewish identity, I just don't want Israel to exist. It's the same as saying,
Hmm.
I'm not against American identity, I just don't think America should exist.
Mhm. Mhm.
Japan is to the Japanese. This is their words. Japan is to the Japanese, what France is to the French, what Israel is to the Jews. Now, without Zionism, if Israel be a normal country, Japan is to the Japanese, what France is to the French, what Israel is to the Israelis. But Israel is the country of the Jewish nationality, which means, this is what the law says, only Jews have self-determination rights in Israel, which means that as an individual, so, they're always talking about how non-Jews, Arabs, Muslims, Christians can become Supreme Court justices in Israel. And that's true so long as they all remain a minority. So long as the Jews control the country, either by minority in a democratic way, or even if they end up being a minority, Israel by law would conceivably have the legal right by Israeli law to make sure that that minority controls the country, because only this minority has self-determination rights, which means the right to rule over yourself.
But it's even more confused because they're not Jews, they're Zionists.
Well, see, so that's the thing. It's very interesting because they call themselves the state of the Jewish people.
Right.
Right. So who are the Jewish people? So by Jewish law, we know the way it works. You're born to a Jewish mother or you convert, you're Jewish. But how about this? Now, if you're an atheist, or even if you are Jews for Jesus, or you convert to another religion, according to the Jewish religion, you're still obligated to fulfill those 613 commandments. You can never alleviate yourself of the obligations and the responsibilities that God gave you when you were born. Or if you converted, you cannot convert back. Okay. Other religions will say, no, that's not true. Christianity is the true religion. The Jews think the guy can't convert. He's converting. Now he's a Christian. But according to Judaism, that's the law. Okay. According to Israeli law. Now, however, I got to tell you, a Jew that's not religious is considered like a Jew not in good standing, but that's not important for us now. But he's considered a Jew in the sense that the definition of Jew for our purpose is somebody who's obligated, even if he doesn't fulfill, even if he doesn't believe, the 613 commandments. Obviously, Israel said all Jews, not Zionists, Jews are entitled to the law of return. And Zionism means the Jews are a nationality and Israel's the state of that nationality, okay? Now, obviously, if you're an atheist, you're still considered a Jew and you're entitled to the law of return. But listen to this. There was a guy named Oswald Refusion. He was a Polish guy, born Jewish, and he later converted to Christianity. His new name was Brother Daniel, a Carmelite monk. He was no anti-Semite. During World War II, he helped Jews escape from the Nazis because of his status as a non-Jew. People didn't even know that he was born Jewish. After Israel was formed, he decided, I want to come live in Israel. By nationality, I'm Jewish. Right? By religion, if you can be an atheist, why can't you be a Christian?
Right.
Right? Your boy, if it's an ethnicity, if you can be an atheist, there's no reason a Jew shouldn't be a Christian. So he says, I want to come the law of return. Israel's Supreme Court said, no, you believe in Christianity, you're not Jewish. So imagine, now, of course, this is nonsensical. Imagine this, okay? So you have Brother Daniel, who was born Jewish, right? Now, before he converted to Christianity, no, you're a Jew, you can come to Israel. If he says, I'm an atheist, I don't believe in any religion. I think religion is ridiculous. Anybody who believes in any religion is retarded. No problem. Yep. Judaism is a nationality. It has nothing to do with religion. Come, Ben Gurion didn't believe in God. Herzl didn't believe in God. You're one of us. Come. You know what? I'm thinking about it. I do believe in God. That's okay. You can believe in God. That means you're religious. No. God's a Trinity. Whoa, God's a Trinity. You're not Jewish anymore. Whoa, hold on. I don't believe in any Messiah. Okay, you're Jewish. Yeah, I believe in a Messiah. Oh, that's good. But it's Jesus. No, you're not Jewish anymore. Well, imagine a guy so Brother Daniel comes and the Supreme Court says he's not Jewish. So, all right, you know what? I don't believe in Christianity. I don't believe in no God, no religion. I'm an atheist now. You're an atheist. Now you're a Jewish national. Now you can come. According to this law, it would come out that if you have a regular Jew, me, or a Jew like me, who decides to abandon his Judaism and convert, let's say, if he decides to abandon his Judaism, become an atheist, not religious anymore, no problem. Yeah. But if he decides, you know what, I believe in Jesus, or I believe Muhammad is the prophet, you're not even you're not Jewish anymore. So I don't know what they would do with such a guy. He's already living in Israel. I don't know if he would have to go through a naturalization process. Non-Jews are allowed to come to Israel, but not automatically become citizens. Now it's up to the discretion of the country. You have to go through a naturalization process. I don't know if a guy's already an Israeli citizen. All of these, Zionism makes no sense because it tried to take the Jewish people and say, we're going to change what you are, which makes no sense, like taking a car and say, this car, it's really a fish. It's not a car. You see how good it works underwater, right? So they said the Jewish people, which for thousands of years we identified as people who are defined by the Jewish religion as having to fulfill the 613 commandments, and the laws are very, very precise. If you have a pregnant woman who's non-Jewish and she converts, so the baby is Jewish when it's born, but there's a disagreement amongst our scholars if that baby is considered converted together with the mother or it's considered born Jewish. What's
Mhm.
the difference? There's a big legal difference. According to the Jewish religion, if let's say you adopt a non-Jewish kid and convert him, a baby, right? You convert him to Judaism. When the baby becomes of age, meaning bar mitzvah, if it's a boy, or bas mitzvah when she's a girl, they are allowed to renounce their Judaism because they didn't accept it by choice.
Mhm.
But that's only if they were converted when they were a minor. If they were born Jewish, you can never renounce your Judaism. So this baby who was born from a mother who converted while the mother was pregnant with this baby, when this baby comes of age, can they renounce their Judaism? Are they considered a convert or are they considered born Jewish? It's a big disagreement amongst our scholars. But this is the level of precision because being a Jew is a legal question. Are you obligated in these commandments or are you obligated in those commandments? And this is what Jews do a whole day. We study the Jewish Torah, we study the law, we study the ethics, we study the wisdom, but Zionism never defined what a Jew really is.
Also,
So they have,
you do it as a way of, I guess, for lack of a better phrase, honoring God. That's why you're doing all this.
yes,
But,
honoring God,
but
great gratitude to God.
yeah.
And if somebody's selfish, he does it because he wants a pleasure in the afterlife.
Oh, okay. So that's another motivation.
That's a lesser motivation,
But
less noble one, but yeah.
Israel's going around saying, okay, well, everybody who's Jewish is part of our Jewish nationality, even if you're a religious Jew.
That's right.
But now we're not religious ourselves, and we don't honor these.
You're right. Take a guy like Netanyahu. Everybody thinks, and it's so infuriating. People think that the state of Israel runs according to Jewish law. Runs according. Benjamin, I want to tell you something. Benjamin Netanyahu is not a religious man. He's completely secular. He's not religious at all. There was once some big tumult in the Knesset. That's their parliament. He was in Poland once, Netanyahu. He came to visit, and they offered him kosher food. And he declined, said, I don't eat kosher food. And he ate clams or shrimp or whatever he ate, non-kosher food. When he came back, so a little later than subsequently, there was a question in Poland of illegalizing the Jewish ritual slaughter. Shchita, it's called, the way you have to slaughter animals in a certain way in order for the animal to be kosher, according to Jewish law. They wanted to outlaw it, and all animals have to be killed a certain way, whatever. And the Jewish community in Poland said, well, what do you mean? It's our religious requirement. And it was said in the Polish parliament, said, what do you mean? The prime minister of the state of Israel said he did not need kosher food, so how could it be a religious requirement? And this was brought up actually in Israel's Knesset. It's one of Netanyahu's political opponents. I think it was Aliza Levi who brought this up. So Israel, statistics show that whenever Israel does something controversial, something that people don't like, attacks against Jews all over rise. It's not an excuse. You remember by what Trump called the Chinese virus, COVID?
Right.
So there were Chinese people here in New York and Chinatown that got beaten up, right? Now, there's no excuse for that. Those are criminals, and you can't beat up a Chinese guy because of a Chinese virus. But there are bad actors out there, and there are criminals out there. And just like they beat up a Chinese person for a Chinese virus, they will more so attack Jews because of what Israel's doing. The thing, though, is that even a bad actor, even a criminal, won't beat up an Irish person because of a Chinese virus. So why are you beating up American Jews because of what Israel does? If you want to beat up Israelis, again, you're a criminal. But at least that the criminal mind would target Israelis. If you're targeting Chinese people for Chinese virus, and again, people are going to say, oh, he said you can beat up Israelis. No, don't twist what I'm saying. Criminals would target Israelis. but the reason why they're targeting Jews is because this slander, this unilateral claim that Israel has that they're the state of the Jews is runs uncontested. And I got to tell you, even Jews, even Zionist Jews, don't know this. A lot. See, there are two issues over here also that are conflated. The whole Zionism thing is based on a bunch of conflation and mixing different concepts and confusion. It's based on confusion. And one of the confusion is that there's two things. There's Zionism, which would induce somebody to support Israel, right? But then there's something else. Let's say you're not a Zionist. You don't care about Zionism. In the West, we have this stereotype that Israel is a Western civilized country. The Palestinians are savage barbarians. And politically, you may be, let's say you're not a Zionist. Let's say you're a random white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. You could be politically on Israel's side.
Right.
So there are many Jews who would say, I'm not a Zionist, but of course, I don't want the Jews in Israel killed. Therefore, Israel has to bomb Gaza because they're looking for Hamas. And if you believe what Israel says, then even if you're not a Zionist, we have the media, we have all sorts of things here in America. In America, we know that, Russia is bad, Ukraine is good. We have all sorts of, every country is like, I'll tell you a story. When I was a kid, I'm 19 years old, the first time I ever met a British guy. I was in yeshiva. I met a guy I never knew any English guys. So this guy, I remember we were sitting here playing chess, and the guy made a bad move. And I told him, this is what happened was, whatever. He moved to the left instead of to the right. So I said, yeah, you guys drive on the wrong side of the road. Now I know why you guys lost the revolution. We were kibitzing around. And we started talking, and I mentioned something about how they mistreated the Americans. And this guy was shocked because he never met an American before. We were in school. This was a dormitory.
Mm-hmm.
And they taught him in England. He grew up in London, an entirely different version of the American Revolution than we have.
Sure.
Completely different. Kind of like Israel and the Palestinians. Britain was Israel, and the Americans were a bunch of rebels, lowlifes, barbarians who would rebel against England. They couldn't be trusted, So of course you're not going to give them representation. First, let them become normal, then you can give them representation. And taxation, well, Britain protects them if necessary. It's a completely different story.
Yep.
And in America, you could support Israel not because you're a Zionist, but because you believe politically what your political party says. A guy watches Fox News or something and Newsmax, and that's nothing to do with Zionism. If people would know, and I'm talking about Jews now, that Israel claims that Zionism means, that Jewish state means, that Israel is your country, not America. That me and you are sitting here on a Zoom meeting and on a podcast. And according to Zionism, your country is America, my country is Israel, and I'm less of an American. Do you agree with that? Because that's what Zionism says.
Mm-hmm.
Zionism says, forget about the definition of Zionism. The Zionists will zigzag you all around before you get but all Zionisms presuppose two things. One, that the Jews are not just a religion, they're a nationality. And two, Israel is the state of that nationality. Because even if the Jews are a nationality, who says Israel is our state? Some 1948, a bunch of guys got together and declared this my state. Maybe I don't want it to be my state.
Right.
Maybe it's not. Maybe I'm still like the Kurds. Imagine a couple of Kurds get together and call it Kurdistan, and all these other Kurds are saying, no, we didn't agree.
Right.
You can't speak for me. So number one, the assumption, the delusion is that the Jews are a nationality, and two, that Israel is the state of that nationality. Those are two delusions, which is the fantasy world that Zionism is. If you were to ask a Jewish guy that even claims he's a Zionist, certainly somebody that says I'm not a Zionist, but I agree with Zionism to an extent, but I wouldn't consider. There's some people that like that. Don't ask me precisely what they mean by it. Do you know this is what Zionism says? Do you agree with that? No, of course not. I'm an American. Well, if you're an American and you don't agree with this, then you're an anti-Zionist. But you see, so the Zionists say, no, it's just a homeland. And By the way, it's not even a homeland. You know what the word homeland means? In English, the word homeland doesn't really say much about what a homeland is. But in other languages, including Hebrew,
Mm-hmm.
a homeland is like in French, La Patria or Mother Russia. La Patria means fatherland.
Mm-hmm.
In Hebrew, Moledes, which means a place you were born.
Mm-hmm.
There's some nationalist philosophy that says there's some organic connection between an ethnicity or a nationality and the place that that ethnicity or nationality originated.
Right.
There's some mystical connection. And indeed, in Israel's Declaration of Independence, again, they don't have a constitution. It says, here the nation were born. Here the Jewish people were born. You know what? That's not the Judaic religious definition of a Jew. According to this, Moses was not Jewish, by the way. He was not part of the Jewish people because he never was in the Holy Land. He died before the Jews went in, before Joshua went into the Holy Land, right? God didn't let him in. According to Jewish religion, the Jews were created when God gave them the law at Mount Sinai in the desert. But according to Zionism, the Jews have nothing to do with the Torah, Mount Sinai, none of this. That's just some mythology, the way the Greeks believe in some mythological guy with little wings on his ankles or a big guy that could, beat up things. We're a nation like all other nations, and we were born here. This was the origin of our ethnicity was here. And that's what homelands means. Israel is not our homeland. Even Eretz Yisrael, the Holy Land, it's not our homeland. We were not, that land is a holy land, and we look at it like a giant synagogue. We always did, a place to serve God. And if you go to Israel, you go to Eretz Yisrael, you go to the Holy Land, you need to behave better than you do outside of it, which is why many Jews did not go there, because it's like living in a gigantic synagogue, God's backyard, we look at it as. These guys took the Holy Land and made it into another Paris or another Berlin.
Mm-hmm.
They profaned it. They what they did, according to our tradition, the land is, put it this way, the land itself, the Holy Land, screams in agony because of what the Zionists did to it, because of what they made it into. It wants to be a holy land. It wants to have people in it that serve God. And when you have these guys, and it's quoted in the name of Ben Gurion, it's probably somebody else said it, another Zionist, but it's quoted in the name of Ben Gurion. He said, Zionism will be successful when we have prostitutes soliciting in Hebrew and being arrested by police that speak in Hebrew. They wanted to be like the regular Russians, but Hebrew speaking, and then the Jews will be normal. Everyone will love the Jews. How'd that work out for them? Huh? What do you say? Because of Israel, everyone's going to love the Jews. No more anti-Semitism. Herzl, the last page of his book, The Jewish State, the last page, the climax, that as soon as Zionism gets off the ground, anti-Semitism will disappear off the face of the earth. Such idiots. They were idiots. Forget about, that they're anti-Jewish and they're anti-religion and they're anti-Semites and they cause anti-Semitism. Forget about that part. They're just idiots. Everything they did was a failure.
The problem is that they failed up so far. It may all be coming undone now, but they've been terribly successful with this madness. And
yeah, you see, the thing is, though, that the success or failure of a endeavor depends upon whether it meets its own objectives, right? Its objectives was to end anti-Semitism, normalize the Jews, and make them into regular people. It did not do that. A secondary objective, a safe place for Jews, all of these things. None of the objectives were fulfilled. They're successful, but not at what they tried to do. So what good is it? And by the way, they have unfair advantages too in terms of the success. They have Jews all over who actually donate money to their country.
Yeah.
Italy doesn't have people all over the world that donate money to the country. A lot of millions and millions and more than millions and millions of dollars go into Israel because these Jews and evangelicals even more so, consider it some kind of obligation to support Israel and throw money in there. So they have a very big advantage over other people, even in terms of that. But in terms of their goals and objectives, they're the biggest failures. And it's a lethal failure.
Yeah.
How do you undo this? How do you undo this?
Hey, can I ask you a question? And this is a question especially for a rabbi, I think. We have 10 commandments, in our world, right?
Uh-huh.
One of them is idolatry, and I
Mm-hmm,
always, as a
mm-hmm.
kid, I always understood, okay, don't kill. I get that. Don't steal. Don't covet. I get that too. You shouldn't do that. But it's like idolatry. Who cares? But as I'm getting older, I'm realizing idolatry means something very specific, and it's a very bad thing. Um, it means putting something in the place of God.
Oh,
Is
right.
that what it
Okay.
means? Is that what it
Yeah.
means? And so when you put Israel as above God, it seems the
Oh,
Zionists.
yes. Zionism, according to Judaism, is idol worship. And even if they're religious Zionists, like let's say the idol worshippers, look, we have the Ten Commandments too. So we and Christianity have that overlap, right? We may not even interpret them the same way, but okay, we believe that there was a creator of the world. Okay, we don't believe it's a trinity, but there's some overlap in the Venn diagram. The Jews and the Muslims both believe that God is a necessary existence, first cause, whatever. Um, there's overlap. We and the Zionists, Zionism is a completely different religion. There's also overlap. The settlers, let's talk about not the secular Zionists, the religious ones, right?
Mhm.
They eat kosher food. They don't work on Sabbath. So there's overlap there too.
Okay.
But we consider them idol worshippers, like in the days of the idol worshippers in biblical times, in the days where they worshiped the Baal. And Elijah the prophet told the Baal worshippers, how long are you going to worship God and the Baal both? If Baal is God, if Baal is your God, then go worship Baal. And if God is your God, then go worship him. But none of these, trying to, as we have an expression in, there's a Yiddish expression, dancing at two weddings at the same time.
Mhm.
Like straddling both sides of the fence, it means. So these Zionists straddle, Zionism is idolatry. Okay, atheism is worse than idolatry. They're atheists, they're idol worshippers, but even the religious ones, they are straddling both sides of the fence. They overlap a lot with the Jewish religion, but we consider them idol worshippers, just like Elijah considered Orthodox Jews in those days idol worshippers because they worshipped idols. You're 100% right.
And and
Zionism is idol worship,
and idolatry is putting is worshiping something other than God,
or in addition to.
or in addition to. Okay, so
In
you can do
addition
both,
to,
but then you're
right.
addicted to it.
It's actually a question in our amongst our scholars, if one of the seven laws, forget the Ten Commandments, the seven laws, the Noahide laws, is not to worship idols, whether that includes something instead of God or even something in addition to God. In the Ten Commandments, in the 613 that Jews are obligated to fulfill, it means even something in addition to God. But in the seven Noahide laws, it's a question if it means something instead of or in addition to. In other words, the reason I'm mentioning all this is because Jewish law, Jewish theology is very precise, and this is what we do all day to try to, figure out the proper interpretation of it. And this is what we spend our life doing. And now comes the Zionists and say, with this freewheeling Marx Brothers attitude towards Jewish identity and, Judaism, okay, you're an atheist, you're a Jew. If not, okay, if you believe in Jesus, well, our Supreme Court says now you're not Jewish. Tomorrow, maybe you will be Jewish. What if our Supreme Court reverses it? And we're the Jewish state. We're the state of the Jews. Okay, we're not the state of the Israelis. It's all. If I think that the more, the solution to Zionism, I would love to see Israel get rid of Zionism,
Hmm.
become a normal country, that France is to the French, what Japan is to Japanese, what
Hmm.
Israel is to the Israelis.
Hmm.
One person, one vote. Just stop with this Jewish nonsense. Stop being, if you want, change the name to Herzlstan or let your citizens decide what to call it. Just get rid of this Jewish stuff. Don't say you have anything to do with the Jews, okay? You didn't want to have anything to do with the
Yeah,
Jews. Herzl, there's an old Jewish joke. What is the difference between Jesus and Herzl?
I don't know.
Herzl celebrated Christmas. Jesus celebrated Hanukkah. Okay, Herzl, he had a Christmas tree. His son converted to Christianity. He did not like Judaism. He actually liked Christianity more than he did Judaism. Go become Christians. What do you want? What do you want with the Jewish people? Why do you have to harass the Jewish people? Why do you have to smear the Jewish people by saying you have a Jewish state? You want to be Jews, the secular Jews, do so the same way there are Jews in America that are secular Jews. Be like be like a bunch of Woody Allens or Barbara Streisands if you want, but just leave this Jewish, stop with this Jewish business. You're not. They're not the Jewish. And that's what's causing all of these problems. They have to have a Jewish majority, and they have to have a Jewish state, and they have to have it in case of a Holocaust, that nonsensical fantasy. I would love to see them just get rid of their whole Jewish
Their
elements.
shtick. It's like
Their
a shtick.
yes, exactly. Yeah. Just get rid of your shtick. Become a normal country like everybody else. Become the country of your citizens. And the truth of the matter is, I'll tell you, I got to tell you, I think that people are handling this Zionism, anti-Zionism thing wrong, and it's to the advantage of Zionism that people do it that way. People look at Zionism as a colonial thing that oppresses Palestinians, and anti-Zionism is, no, you shouldn't oppress the Palestinians and you shouldn't colonize anything. But that's not correct, because Zionism has really nothing to do with the Palestinians per se. Meaning, let's say there would be a two-state solution in theory, right? And the Palestinians would have their own state, and maybe even they'd get 90% of the land, okay? The Zionists would be left with a state of Israel in the Negev desert. That's it. But let's say the Palestinians would be happy and the Israelis would be happy. These anti-Zionists would all be happy as well, right? But why not? The Palestinians are okay. No, but I wouldn't be happy because Israel is the same Israel. It's the same Zionist state. It still claims to be the state of the Jews. It's still not the state of its citizens, because there will still be a non-Jewish minority in Israel, Christians, Muslims, Hindus, whatever. It's the same Zionism. Zionism is an ideology. It needs to be, I'm not saying that people shouldn't bother with the human rights issues. No, they should. But if you really want to win this battle against Zionism, if you really want to get rid of Zionism, and Zionism is bad for the Jews in Israel, it's bad for the Jews out of Israel. Never mind, the people in Gaza and West Bank. Never mind that. It's bad for the Jews in Jerusalem, okay? It's not good for anybody. Zionism is not good for anybody. Even if you don't care about anybody, except your narrow family, right? Whatever your religion is, Zionism is not good for your family. Zionism needs to be attacked intellectually, because it's an intellectual system, a pseudo-intellectual system. It's an absurd, self-contradictory, freewheeling, Kafkaesque, it make a nonsensical ideology, and it needs to be exposed as such. If people would attack Zionism in the way I'm doing it, it's contradictions. What's the definition of a Jew? How could Brother Daniel not be Jewish, but an atheist can? What do you mean that you're the state of the Jews? Who elected you spokesman for the Jews in America? All of these things need to be emphasized, but where people are distracted, well, okay, what are you going to do with the Palestinians? And I'm not saying not to discuss that, but I'm saying that that's not going to get rid of Zionism.
It's a little bit like going to Muslims after 9/11 and saying, do you renounce terrorism? Well, a normal Muslim has nothing to do with terrorism.
That's right.
Why are you dragging him into it?
Exactly. And this is even worse, because, ISIS never claimed that they represent all Muslims. Right, they claim they represent Islam, but they never claim, they say that they are their authentic interpretation of Islam. Fine. But they never claimed that they're the country, or they're the way the Vatican represents the Catholics, or that Israel claims to represent the Jews. ISIS never even claimed that. No country claims such a thing. I mean, the Vatican from a religious perspective, but politically, the state of the Catholics in America is America, right? They don't say, well, my country is the Vatican. Israel, according to Zionism, my country is Israel. That's insane. No other country like that in the world, right?
And no other religion. I mean, and it's not Judaism that's doing it.
There is no Arab state, no Muslim state that claims to be the state of all the Arabs, that claims to be the state of all the Muslims. There is only one country, and has nothing to do with the Jewish religion. It's the religion of Zionism, if you want to call it a religion. The ideology of Zionism, which overlaps with Judaism, but it's a completely different version. Look, if you go to an Orthodox Jew like me, people do it every day, like for the last 8 months. What's the story with these Jewish Zionists? You know, like if Judaism is not Zionism, look at these religious Orthodox Jewish Zionists. And I tell them, this is like going to the Pope and asking him, how does he explain the Christian religious Zionists, the evangelicals?
Right.
Imagine going to the Pope, to the Catholic Church, and say, what do you mean you have nothing, you're not a Zionist? Look at all these religious Christians who are Zionists. And the Pope will say, well, no, I'm Catholic. Those are Protestants. Those are evangelicals. I have nothing to do with that. Yeah, but they're both Christians, right? They're both religious Christians. That's the same thing. That's me. That's giving you a sense of what it's like when someone comes to me and says, okay, they're religious, Orthodox, Jewish Zionists. It's not my religion. It's not, and the distance between Catholicism and evangelicals is nothing compared to the distance and the difference between non-Zionist Jews and Zionist Orthodox Jews.
Other world, other planet.
It's another religion.
It's just that the other group has masqueraded as being your representative, which must be galling.
That's right.
It just must be maddening.
It is. It's maddening, and it's also lethal.
Exactly. Well, that's really the whole point of us talking, because everyone's got to know whatever Israel's doing has nothing to do with Judaism.
That's right.
Whatsoever.
I mean, if somebody wants to be a Zionist, and that'll be his version with Judaism, you know, but don't attack the Catholic Church because of the evangelicals.
Right. Or the bad Catholics, right? You can't say, oh, well, there were some Catholic priest pedophiles. Well, the whole church must be a rotting, structure.
That's true. But here, though, we're talking about doctrine. The doctrine of Zionism belongs to a different religion than I practice.
Gotcha. It's not even, gotcha.
It's not even a bad act, a sin. It's a doctrine of Zionism. It's an ideology. And according to the religion that I practice, it's idol worship.
Idolatry. And,
right. It's idolatry.
So instead of, you're putting something else in God's place.
That's exactly what it is. You're taking your Jewish identity, which is a God, which is a job description for serving God.
Right.
And you're saying it's political as well. It's political. It's connected to a land, a country, connected to a, that's literally, that's idol worship.
Gotcha. Well, thank you so much. I know you wanted to keep, we were going to keep this to a certain length. We went a little beyond. I appreciate you doing that. And everybody, just want to remind everybody, if you want to pursue these ideas in greater depth, Yaakov has written an entire book on this. He's done many interviews, approached this from many different dimensions. And it's really important. This is a really important thing that we all get straight. For just out of a matter of justice, sanity, and sanity as well.
Right.
Well, pleasure to meet you.
Pleasure being here. Thank you so much.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.